Across the Flow FM network, a Flow News 24 update.
At the Flow News desk, it's Wayne with you this morning, and we take a look at the Commonwealth Games debacle in Victoria. Over the weekend, there was a joint statement put out by the Commonwealth Games Federation and the Victorian Government. And it stated that the July 23 announcement by the Victorian Government to withdraw from hosting the 2026 Commonwealth Games, that parties that have been affected have reached a confidential good faith negotiation. The parties subsequently agreed to refer the dispute for mediation at the time, and this mediation has now been engaged with and respectfully, according to the Government of Victoria's press release, and that concessions that have been made to reach an agreement. The State of Victoria has agreed to pay the Commonwealth Games parties, which are a number of groups, it's the World Group but also the Australian Group too, an Australian dollars amount of $380 million. The parties also agreed that the multi-hub regional model was more expensive to host than the traditional models. Traditional models here, I think, refers to the fact that they hosted the 2006 Commonwealth Games in Melbourne, and that the regional hub one would cost more overall to host. Well, I would assume that that would have been looked at when they did the feasibility for this to start with, but ultimately that would be something be obvious for those that were going to put together a bid for the Games, which they must have done. If they didn't, then that was, again, poor form from the Victorian Government of the time, which was Daniel Andrews' government. Now, here's the interesting bit I want to read to you. The settlement was supported by the mediators. Well, the mediators, of course, are trying to reach a settlement, so that would be obvious. The terms of the settlement will otherwise remain confidential. The settlement finalises all matters between the parties, and the parties are legally bound to not speak further regarding the details of the settlement. That's the bit that has everyone literally going, what on earth is Daniel Andrews covering over? And that then comes to another press release that came out on yesterday about the very issue of the IBAC. Now, this is an amendment that was put before the Victorian Parliament, the Upper House Amendment, which was to look at the reporting reforms. And so these are reforms that were being put that Labor opposed in the Upper House. Now, the Upper House passed the reforms for IBAC. Now, this is a corruption body that's being set up in Victoria to look at issues where things have not been done correctly by the government. The bill seeks to ensure the timely tabling of IBAC reports in Parliament and to expedite the tabling while preserving relevant protections and rights on those upon whom IBAC may comment unfavourably. The whole Victorian community understands the importance of IBAC, created by the Baillieu government, to have the resources and powers it needs with adequate balance to manage corruption and root out corruption in Victoria, says the report from the Victorian opposition. The opposition is increasingly concerned at delays in the tabling of IBAC reports and bills to the Parliament. Despite overwhelming support in the Upper House, Premier Daniel Andrews will not allow this bill to be even introduced to the lower house. As the bill came forward in the lower house, his members voted immediately to stop it. The Shadow Special Minister of State is David Davis. He said that yet again the Andrews government has demonstrated it just doesn't take integrity reform seriously. Perhaps the Andrews government is too arrogant to support an opposition bill, but Victorians will be rightly asking whether they actually have something to hide. And again, we go back to the question of something to hide. And it is a very real one for Victorian people because, again, this joint Commonwealth Games statement that came out of the weekend, and I read it again to you, that the settlement will otherwise remain confidential. Now, this is Victorian taxpayers are going to foot the bill for $380 million, but the settlement's confidential and that the parties are legally bound to not speak further regarding the details of the settlement. It does seem to me that Daniel Andrews is not allowing any scrutiny of any decision that he takes. And that's why you need an IBAC. And that's why you need them to report really quickly on matters. And that's why you need a government of the day to pass this bill so that they can do so. But the very same Andrews government is restricting the IBAC from reporting. And on one side, they're restricting the parties in a Commonwealth Games settlement from actually telling you what the settlement exactly is and how they came to it. And then they're restricting anybody investigating it and presenting that to the Parliament. It does seem like it's not a state of Australia where freedom and democracy reigns, but it does seem like it is one of those Cold War type states that wouldn't release any information. You will not do as we do, but you will do as we say. It's very interesting times in Victoria, and again, it just seems like there is a lack of information and a lack of accountability by the state Victorian government.
A Flow News 24 update.